The
for
United
sure.
States facing Wales in San Jose, California. Shout out to the sellout here, 18,000 to send off the United States on their World Cup journey scenes. Good vibes going into this one.
Massive. I mean, this was a game that when we had previewed, we kind of talked about who we were going to see, what we could expect from this Welsh side as well. When you look at Wales, they're ranked 30th in the FIFA ranking. This was their first time playing outside of Europe. They are not going to a World Cup, but this Welsh side had a devastating loss, right, in the qualifiers for the World Cup against Switzerland. They're a very talented team. We also talked a little bit about Jess Fishlock, and it's an NWSL international crossover weekend. And I was wrong. I was like, Jess Fishlock's not going to play for OL Reign. She was. I'm like a little bit confused about the logistics of it, because to go from Seattle, Washington to Orlando, Florida, and then somehow get to San Jose, California must have been a heck of a travel for Jess Fishlock. She ended up with a little bit of a knock during the OL Reign game. So she does not feature for Wales today. She was not available off the bench. We didn't get to see her. But it was for Gemma Granger, the manager. She had some good lineups. I think the game plan for this Wales side was pretty impressive to see. The way they rolled out, you could tell that they were going to play in a low to mid block against the United States and force everything wide. It was really tight, really compact down the spine for this Welsh side, and the lanes and the flanks for the United States were wide open, and they didn't really utilize that, in my opinion, until the end of the first half and then into the second half. But it was so narrow in the front line for the U.S. But let's get into it. Starting lineups, everything that happened. I mean, that's kind of like my take on Wales, though, at this point. Like, they came out and defensively had a game plan that looked pretty good. And I think they grew with confidence throughout the game, because the goals for the United States did not come until the 76th minute, right? Until the final 15 minutes.
I like that you're actually starting with that a little bit,
Yeah.
because that's the energy. I think that's sort of the immediate reaction and takeaway out of this game. Of course, maybe with the starting lineups too, that's where you sort of get those preliminary kind of reactions, whether it was for Wales or the United States, really, because I mean, you touching on Jess Fishlock and the fact that they dropped their starting 11, and you don't see, the all-time capped player for Wales on the men or women's side of the game, leading goal scorer for this team, not available or unable at this point to go ahead and really take part of. Look, it's a historic match, I think, in their national team program. We talked about that a bit on the preview as well. Folks maybe get fixated on a number. Oh, they're a 30 ranked team, but they're a top 10 ranked team within UEFA, in terms of all across European competitions. And getting the opportunity to play outside of Europe, massive opportunity, right, for this program, and to not have your most iconic player, essentially, for lack of a better word or phrasing, is kind of a bummer. It sucked to have to see, but it was nice to see that she was in good spirits, tweeting about the game, and excited to be there and willing the team on, and it. Within that, though, you take a look and see, okay, who are going to be some players inside of this starting 11 for Wales who were going to maybe cause some problems for this national team, because I think that's the other thing what we're looking for in this one. It's a send-off game, and in the preview we were curious about some of the level of play. Is it going to get chippy or physical at times? Is there sort of a friendly agreement between the two sides to just sort of go out and have a good run out there? We heard from Andonovski that the number one priority was just to exit this match healthy, and then the result would be kind of secondary. So I think, kind of looking at the Wales lineup, obviously not seeing Fishlock, that's a pretty big name that's missing. But we talked a little bit about Angren James as well in the preview as the player to maybe look out for here in this game. And while I agree that gave some problems in the midfield at times, Rana Roberts in this game for Wales really covering a ton of ground there. Talk about having to have some defensive responsibility going up against Thompson or Smith whenever they switched, and at times having to deal with Crystal Dunn. But maybe that type of individual performance is something that motivates a team, because on the other side, for the United States starting 11, there were, I think, maybe some surprises here, because on the preview, we talked about wanting to see or get a glimpse at what we think would be the ideal starting 11 for this United States women's national team. And I don't know if this is actually it, Lisa.
Yeah, this is not what I predicted for sure. I mean, you can you can fact check me on our preview episode. I thought we would see what we would see heading into the World Cup. I thought that we would maybe get a glimpse of the starting 11 that we'll see come 2 Fridays from now. However, maybe this is it, right? I mean, I can't predict the future, but I just don't think this was it. And that's what I alluded to at the beginning when saying Vlatko Andonovski, head coach for the US, kept his cards close to his chest in terms of what the starting lineup is going to look like and how that's going to roll out. But in terms of like the back line, when you look at what Vlatko Andonovski did roll out with Alyssa Nair in goal, you and I talked about that. What would happen? Would he split time? But nope, she got a full 90 minutes. Looks like she will be the number one goalkeeper, as she has been for the last several years, heading into this World Cup series. And the back four, Dunn, Gurma, Cook, and Fox. That's what I predicted. But fascinating that this was the first time the back four has ever played together, those four players. And to me, that was a shocking fact. I mean, I'm sure if I thought about it, I would have realized that. But the fact that it's usually been a Sauerbrunn in there or a Huerta and then a rotation happening. But fascinating to see that. I think that overall they did a really good job, and we got to see how the difference is going to be between a Dunn and a Fox on the outside, because Crystal Dunn will utilize the flank space. That's what she did in this Wales game. She really attacked. She was able to move forward, whereas Fox likes to cut inside. She likes to get the ball at her feet and cut inside and kind of dictate play centrally a little bit more, which is just something that Gurman and Cook have to get used to if that's the way they're going to play. And when Fox was doing that, the midfielder would pop out. But that's the back four and then the back five that they started with, that I thought was going to happen. But then it gets a little tricky moving forward.
Yeah.
The front six, it was Sullivan, Haran, and Ashley Sanchez in the midfield for Vlatko Andonovski. This surprised me. I mean, I really thought we were going to see Rose Lavelle, and we didn't get to see her at all throughout this game. I understand not wanting players to get injured, wanting to keep them healthy and run into it. But I just think to go from not playing a single minute in a game from April to the World Cup is a really long stretch from Rose Lavelle, considering they said she was cleared in this game against Wales.
Yeah, that came up a couple times, right? I think on the broadcast, so no matter where you are watching, it sort of mentioned, oh, she's medically cleared, and hey, that's great. That's a box that's checked off, right? But I think the other box that folks are looking to get checked off are the actual physical minutes. So, when is that going to come? And now I think it's pretty clear that it's not going to come until actual World Cup play. But I'm with you though. I think in terms of looking at this starting 11, there's three, maybe even four players that I didn't anticipate in terms of being what's considered the ideal starting 11 going into a World Cup. Thrilled to see the first ever start for Thompson with this team. That's great. As the youngest player on this team. Sanchez obviously getting into the mix in light of Rose Lavelle not having the minutes today. And even with Morgan and Smith, like how's that going to look moving forward up top with Thompson? Is it going to be Williams? Is it going to be Rodman? And even honestly, even Emily Fox, I think with kind of the versatility within the back line with Sonnet, with Huerta, with those two defenders also going into this final 23 player roster of this World Cup, who is going to be that extra outside back? So not seeing Ertz in this one, I was a little curious about as well. I think that's a player that you look at and say maybe that is someone who you slot in, kind of put that label of ideal starter in terms of Andonovski's tactics moving forward. And the fact that we had heard, in the build up to this game, that they would utilize this as preparation. And perhaps now that it's done and dusted, we know that the preparation in this was to maybe see adjustments, because we saw a lot of rotation in this game. Sure.
There was a lot of rotation in the front line, as you mentioned. Thompson, Morgan, Smith. I don't think that's going to be the starting lineup at the World Cup. I think to get Thompson a start was crucial. Kind of see what she said, see what she could do from the jump, and kind of impress. Maybe get some of the nerves out a little bit, and with Alyssa Thompson getting the start in the front line, I think that there was at some point, Vlatko Andonovski in media or in an interview had said that it's pretty much a like for like swap in terms of Swanson, right? That was the immediate call up. As soon as Swanson went down in April against Ireland, Thompson was already on a plane at halftime of that match. Now, I personally don't think that Thompson is like an actual like for like swap for Swanson, just in terms of experience and what happens there. But that's kind of what he alluded to, saying that like, yeah, she can slot into that starting lineup wherever Swanson would have been. Now is Thompson. And yes, they have similar styles of play and they've got good instincts and they have similar skill sets that they can bring to the field. But that's something that I wouldn't expect to see moving forward. Honestly, I think Williams should be in there, but I'm not so sure that's going to happen. But yeah, you talked about rotation for this team. The subs didn't come until the half, but that's typical. We did get one sub at the half, Trinity Rodman in for Alex Morgan up front. There's a little bit of muscle soreness reported for Alex Morgan before the game. So to give her 45 minutes and to run is promising. And then to see Rodman slot in, great. But interesting that she played the 9 and Smith still stayed out wide.
I think it's important that you note that, because we're talking about like ideal starting 11s here, like who are going to be the 11 that they have a preference for over maybe some other players navigating this group stage. They haven't had a camp or games together since April. That's something else that we talked about a bit in the preview. And, we're just sort of fact checking ourselves a little bit about things that we previewed in this game ahead of the recap. And I'll put myself on there as well. I had in my written preview on .com that this game was going to end 2-0, and that not only was it going to end 2-0, but the goals were not going to happen in this game until the second half.
Yep.
And guess what happened? They all came in the second half.
Got it right, baby.
So I'm just kind of like, there's a number of things here you mentioned it already. That entire back line playing together for the first time in a competitive match, going to a World Cup. We see Sanchez, essentially in place of Lavelle, Horan and Sullivan, familiar, with each other. Thompson getting a first start alongside Morgan, Smith. We saw some switching along that top line as well. And maybe that's where we kind of narrow things here in this first segment of this episode. This first half, we saw this team try to start off on the front foot. We saw them try to get a little patient at times, maybe in spite of themselves. Look, they were getting into dangerous areas. Let's not act like they weren't. They had the majority of the possession. They were on the ball far more than Wales were. But there just wasn't that final pass. There just wasn't that kind of, kind of clinical fire that we kind of see, the little bit of ruthlessness I think that you look for sometimes as this machine of the United States women's national team. And even though there was good movement and we saw the rotations and the switching of sides at point, you could just still sort of see maybe this kind of like, I don't want to say like timidness, but it took them a little bit of time to kind of unlock that. But I think a part of it is it's all a combination of all the sum of its parts that we keep talking about it, kind of over and over, kind of just like the lack of time together, the first timers on the back line together. I mean, we did see at one point, even in this first half, that there was a little bit of a scary moment in which that defensive shape tried to play out of the back. And we saw a little bit of a counter press from Wales, but Alyssa Nair was there to sort of snuff out the danger.
Yeah, I think it's important that they did play out of pressure, right? Because in the World Cup, they're going to see a high press, whether it's at the very start of the game or maybe at the start of the half or throughout the entirety. They're going to see that. And this back four needs to be able to break it. So I like that they tried that and they didn't just say, hey, let's play a little bit more route one when Wales gives that counter press. But I think throughout the first 45 minutes of this game for the United States, there was definitely some, I'm going to say like, kinks to shake out for this team in the best way possible.
Dust off the cobwebs sometimes.
Exactly. Dust off the cobwebs, shake off some of the nerves. It was a sold out stadium in California. A lot of players playing in front of their families and hometowns, being local. And I think even
lots of sun.
Lots of sun. The players with like towels over their head. Hilarious. Can we get them some baseball hats or like something? Bucket hats? I don't know. But even like Alyssa Thompson to start the game, there was moments where it was like her legs were moving too fast. She ends up tripping over herself. I think the first ball she gets and going in line, trying to cross it in. It was like very tiny things that they just needed to shake off. And that's why you have a send-off game. Even the decision making, I think, throughout the first half was at times questionable for me, more so in the final third and the final moment to get a goal, because they do so much hard work in the buildup, working the ball around, the off ball movement, passing it, switching the ball from side to side. But then the final pass, the final shot, the final cross was off, whether the shot sailed over the crossbar or the cross was to no one and pretty much mishit and sent out of bounds, or the cross wasn't to someone. Like, this is at a level where the players that are getting headline need to take a peek inside the box and see, okay, where are my runners? You should have one front post, should have one back post, and you should have one around the penalty spot, maybe one also at the top of the box, just like as a general guideline. And if your crosses aren't going to those spots when runners are open, to me, that's something that's like, okay, you need to fix that. And as the game progressed, we did see that get fixed. We did see them make a more influential decisions in the final end of the field in the attacking third.
I think that's the other side of the coin, right? And we'll definitely talk about it after the break in terms of giving the second half and the substitutes their due, dap and props and all of that. But to close out this first half, it's an important point that you bring up about the set pieces, because I was like, somebody water these crops for set piece services. We saw some questionable stuff from the corner flags. They ended up closing out this half with like 8 corners, and I would argue that half of them were not great service into the box.
You could tell they're missing Swanson.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. She took all the corners for them. And now to have a slew of players taking them, right? We saw Sophia Smith take them, Ashley Sanchez from the right side, Savannah DeMello took them when she came in. I mean, any player is capable at this level of taking them, but they have to be better. They have to be more clinical. And you're exactly right. As the game progressed, the set pieces got better. The crosses from the wide areas got a lot better, and they were finding targets, not just blindly crossing or sending them in. And like, this is also, it was good defense by Wales, right? Like, they did a really good job of marking up, marking space, getting to the first and second balls, making it difficult for the U.S. to win them. But it's only going to get harder for the United States as they progress throughout this summer in the World Cup.
I will say there was a part of this first half, and like I said, I mentioned, I even wrote it in the prediction part of the preview, where I was like, you know what? There's enough here, though. There's enough A time and B players to maybe make some adjustments and turn some things around.